I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, this is exactly why I'm suspicious of people who push criminal justice reform. A man who was given clemency by Governor Jay Inslee a few years ago has now been arrested with enough fentanyl pills to kill thousands of people, and you'll never guess the state lawmaker who he was cozied up next to. Plus, the CEO of INRIX explains his decision to move his company's headquarters over a homelessness hotel. And Starbucks baristas may just be the most entitled workers in America. That and much more coming up today on Undivided. Right now, if you are a veteran, member of the military, or a first responder, you can get your first year of Undivided for 30% off. Just go to patreon.com/undivided and use the promo code USA. USA. Hello, and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. I don't trust them. Don't trust them. Whenever someone is singularly dedicated to quote-unquote criminal justice reform, there's only one of three possibilities for what their motive could be. You want to guess with me? White guilt. Okay, there's obviously the very clear category of white guilt. Whether it's deserved or not, I don't know. Maybe you were racist earlier on in life and now you're trying to make up for it. Financial incentive. We saw this with like the BLMs, right? Where they're out there pushing criminal justice reform and then they profit millions of dollars and they go buy themselves mansions or they get these lucrative government contracts like was the case in the city of Seattle, and then they never actually produce anything that their contract was for. Or what do you think the third option is? Someone who is laser focused on criminal justice reform. They're a criminal, right? They're a criminal. And that seems to be the case with Percy Levy. So this was a story that broke over the weekend. Fantastic reporting, again, by our friends at the Linwood Times. Yay, independent media. If you haven't supported the Linwood Times, please do so. So this actually comes off of a story we discussed last week with a highly concerning release from prison that Governor Inslee made that we'll talk about momentarily. But then we get this news from the Linwood Times. The headline, Percy Levy, who Governor Inslee granted clemency, arrested with illegal firearms and kilos of hard drugs. Gee, that's interesting. So on its face, you could look at that and say, okay, so Inslee gave him clemency in 2019. Fast forward 6 years. This guy has allegedly, but based on the preponderance of the evidence, looks like he was out there slinging deadly drugs to the people of this state and committing new crimes. But there's so many more layers to this story that make it worthy of the top story in our show today and speak to what I've seen with the problem of people who push criminal justice reform. So first, the details of what happened here. So it says from the Linwood Times, detectives obtained a warrant for Levy's residence in Everett, where they found 2,818 grams of powder cocaine. Doesn't sound like personal use, does it? 14.7 grams of rock cocaine and 556 grams of fentanyl, which, by the way, is enough fentanyl to kill like 250,000 people. They also found a handgun, packaging material, and a digital scale signifying intent to distribute. Levy is being charged with 11 Class B felonies, each with a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison and up to $20,000 in fines. And this is, of course, not his first rodeo. As we mentioned, Governor Inslee granted him clemency in 2019. The Linwood Times says, since the age of 13, Levy has been in and out of jails and prisons. He was arrested in 2002 for a drug house robbery and spent 17 years in prison before being granted executive clemency from former Governor of Washington, Jay Inslee, in 2019. So here's where we get into the multiple layers of here, like a criminal continuing to be a criminal, not the surprise of the century. A governor making a bad decision on pardons or clemency, not the first time it has happened. But Percy Levy in particular, I mean, you couldn't write this. You could not write this. So he has become one of the faces of criminal justice reform in Washington state. And he has been someone who I actually put him in two of the three categories that I mentioned of people whose sole mission in life seems to be taking it easy on criminals. Clearly the white guilt doesn't work because he's black, but someone who has profited off of criminal justice reform and this idea of redemption, and someone who is allegedly still very involved in criminal activity. So again, from the Linwood Times, Levy works as a community outreach specialist for the Washington Defender Association, which that might sound familiar because they're like one of the main entities for pushing these soft on crime policies. He's also the founder of an automobile vendor in Everett called Redemption Auto. Levy is considered a, quote, symbol of personal redemption on the Redemption Auto's website with the mission to transform lives. Levy also sits on the board of, you guessed it, the Black Lives Matter Seattle-King County chapter as treasurer. So a lot of different elements there, and we'll go at them one by one. First, Seattle, I looked on their website, Black Lives Matter, Seattle-King County. Whew, they were quick to pull his picture from their website. They did post this on Facebook. The board of directors and leadership of Black Lives Matter, Seattle-King County are saddened and shocked by the news regarding the alleged incidents involving one of our board members. We take these allegations seriously. We move swiftly and take an action to place this board member on temporary relief of duty. Formally removed him from administrative access and duties immediately pending the investigation and case, at which time we will be prepared to take all necessary steps to ensure safety of our organization, staff, board, and community. So that gets the BLM thing out of the way. I think much more interesting, impactful, would you say, are his close ties to Democratic lawmakers who today, right now, are busy in Olympia pushing soft on crime policies. Can you guess who a lawmaker is that he's had a pretty good relationship with on pushing some of these soft on crime policies? The queen of soft on crime herself, Representative Tara Simmons, who we've talked about many times. I mean, Tara Simmons is a felon. She was the first formerly incarcerated person to be elected to the state house, which I would find to be a fantastic story of redemption. I do believe in redemption. I think it's awesome when someone can turn their lives around to do something better. But she has used that redemption to singularly focus on helping criminals without any care or concern for the public safety consequences. I think it's interesting, one of the bills this session that Representative Tara Simmons pushed was House Bill 1139. Guess what that did? It says promoting public safety and deterring unlawful firearm possession by increasing criminal, or she was rather opposed to this. House Bill 1139 was a Republican-backed bill. Had one Democratic sponsor. It would have promoted public safety and deterred unlawful firearm possession by increasing criminal penalties for unlawful possession of a firearm. So Percy Levy, accused of unlawful possession of a firearm, his buddy Tara Simmons, who's the vice chair on the Public Safety Committee that killed this bill, that would have made for stricter punishments for people who unlawfully possess a firearm. The friends you keep, right? So also worth noting that this legislative session, Representative Tara Simmons pushed a bill, House Bill 1192. And I mean, you can't write this stuff. You can't write this stuff. So House Bill 1192, the main purpose of it was to say if you are released from prison, you know, you're on DOC supervision, Department of Corrections, and if you violate the conditions of your release, for some people, you can get sent back to prison. There can be severe consequences for violating the conditions of your release. So what did Tara Simmons want to accomplish with House Bill 1192? Well, she wanted to increase the standard, the burden of proof, wanted to make it more difficult to prove that someone violated the conditions of their release. Here is Tara Simmons 2 months ago introducing House Bill 1192 in the Public Safety Committee.
My thinking around that was really just that when people are out and they finally release and they start to establish some housing and family connections and employment, to have a violation, based on not a very high burden of proof, can really uproot them and make them go back into prison and lose the progress that they've made. And we want to help people re-enter and be successful so we can have safe communities.
Yeah, we want to help people re-enter and be successful so we can have safe communities. So we want to make it more difficult for the DOC to put someone back in prison who violated the conditions of their release. You want to guess who one of the main testifiers in favor of that bill was 2 months ago? Percy Levy.
There really is some horror stories about how these hearings go, the outcomes, and how long it takes to fix them. By the time you get to the courts to challenge the standard, you've already done the time. It's insignificant. Nothing's really going to change unless they took good time, and you're going to remain longer. And since it involves a person possibly doing more time as a sanction, it just seems to me and most of the people I think that are watching or in DLC, the reasonable doubt is a really good standard to have in there. And I can understand why DLC is unhappy with it, because I've seen a lot of those hearings. I've challenged outcomes. I've seen other people, and I can see why that they would not want that standard. I'll just leave it at that. But we're pro on the bill.
You know, that's exactly what I would say if I was a felon who got out of prison early, who's actively committing crimes in my community. I would definitely take the time out of my schedule to testify in favor of a bill in Olympia that makes it harder to send you back to prison for breaking the law. I mean, you can't write it any better than that. So here you've got Tara Simmons, who again is pro-criminal. Make no mistake, that is virtually the only thing that she does in Olympia. And she is hand in hand with people like Percy Levy trying to push through bills to take it easy on criminals and simultaneously blocking bills like House Bill 1139, which would have stiffened penalties for unlawful possession of a firearm, one of the exact crimes that her buddy Percy Levy is now accused of committing. And I just played that testimony from him 2 months ago. I don't really think you get involved in widespread distribution of narcotics just overnight. So my gut tells me that Percy Levy, while he sat there in front of the Public Safety Committee testifying on this soft on crime bill, was actively pushing fentanyl on our streets, killing people. And speaking of Black Lives Matter and his involvement in that organization, I wonder how many black people died from the fentanyl that Percy Levy pushed onto the streets of Snohomish County in Washington State. Yeah, Black Lives Matter my ass. Now, when you're out there killing them, when you're slinging deadly drugs, wonder what he needed the firearm for. So it's just, you can't be more 100% suspicious of anyone whose primary mission is to push soft on crime policies and block any sort of legislation to actually hold criminals accountable. From Black Lives Matter to the Washington Defenders Association to Representative Tara Simmons to Percy Levy. Motivation, 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 motivation. Either you're profiting off of it, like many of these organizations, nonprofits that popped up after the summer of 2020, after the George Floyd thing in Minneapolis, and then got millions and millions and millions of dollars in your money, and then were never checked up on and never actually did anything of substance. So either you're profiting off of it, either you have severe white guilt because you're driven just solely by ideology, or you're a criminal. And you see this as a really good opportunity to try to put laws in place that benefit your criminal conduct. Absolutely insane. You can't make this up. One thing I'll say that's not a surprise necessarily, I tweeted out about this when the Linwood Times pushed this out. I said, breaking via Linwood Times, career criminal Percy Levy, given clemency by Jay Inslee, just got arrested with enough fentanyl to kill thousands. Levy has been celebrated by soft on crime Wall House Dems as a story of redemption and sits on the local BLM board. And I pushed that out, and a few minutes later, I look back at the tweet. And if you're familiar with how X works, the at Wall House Dems wasn't lit up. And I thought, that's weird. Did I mistag them? Did I misspell their tag or something? No. Washington House Democrats can't take the heat for who they decide to cozy up to, and they untag themselves. A government entity, can they even do that? They removed themselves from the conversation, which is a feature on X, and what it does is it makes it so no one, not only are you removed from the tag in the original post, but no one who tags you on that post after that can actually tag you, because they didn't want the criticism. So you want to cozy up to criminals, and you want to push soft on crime bills, and you want to hold people like Percy Levy up as an example of redemption, and oh, look at these wonderful things that he's doing in the community. This is exactly why we need to let people out of prison early. And then you don't want to, as elected leaders, public servants, you don't want to take the criticism when there's an example of that very clearly going wrong. How many people do you think, House Dems, the fentanyl push by Percy Levy killed? How many people? We'll never know. We'll never know the answer to that. And you are, this is it's the epitome of the House Democrats, and really of Democrats in Washington state in general. Don't want, no feedback, not accepting any criticism, absolutely not, won't defend our positions. They don't even want to be tagged in the post on X that calls them out for cozying up to this guy. Cowards. absolute cowards. I don't even know if they can legally do that. I know you can't block constituents or anyone from a government social media account, but to make it so that your constituents can't even mention you or tag you, at the very least, it lacks any sort of transparency or accountability and makes them look petty, like petty cowards, which they are. And I would just say, again, this comes off the news last week that one of the things Governor Jay Inslee did, in addition to clearly giving pardons and clemency to some people who are still engaged in criminal activity, he quietly in the last few days of his administration granted the release of Timothy Pauly, a mass murderer who killed 3 people at the Barn Door Tavern in 1980 in SeaTac, tried to kill 2 others. I mean, if he hadn't failed at killing 2 others, he would have been the murderer of 5 people. And that's the kind of people that Democrats want to celebrate as redeemed. And that's essentially what Jay Inslee said in his order. That Timothy Pauly has, since the first time he denied him release a few years ago, that it was 2022, he's come out, now he believes, in his final days in office, that Timothy Pauly, one of the worst mass murderers in our state's history, is reformed. One of the things that broke my heart when I was reading the reactions to this story, and I know Nicole's been really close with Timothy Pauly, with the families that have been pushing against Timothy Pauly's release. One of the family members was saying, I don't remember which news report it was, that they were told at sentencing, Timothy Pauly will never see the light of day again. He will never be a free man. And that was told to them by police and prosecutors who probably believed it at the time, who probably could never have imagined when he was sentenced decades ago that we would have a governor who would use his powers to give this guy early release. But this is Democrats. They cozy up to criminals. They cozy up to criminals and they make life more difficult and dangerous for the law-abiding. That's what they're all about. One other thing I wanted to mention, since we're on the topic of like the Linwood Times and Democrats not caring at all what you think, I just had to push this out there. But first of all, Linwood Times has been doing exceptional work. So I had mentioned House Dems, we don't want the criticism, so we're going to untag ourselves from this post on X. We can't even see what people have to say about the things we do and we cozy up to. So right now is kind of a lull in the legislative session. There's still hopefully work being done, but they just had last week the House of Origin cut off. And so now the bills that were passed out of Senate are going to be considered in the House and vice versa. So I don't expect there to be a lot of movement this week. So some of these legislators are out in their communities having town halls, which I think is great. I think opportunities for citizens to come, demand answers, ask questions of them, that's a wonderful thing to do. But if you're Democrats and you're holding one of these town halls, you want it to be as fake and scripted as possible. The Linwood Times was at one up in the 21st Legislative District where Mark Elias is a state senator. They said approximately 250 people attended the 21st Legislative District Town Hall on March 15th. There were no free-form questions taken from the attendees. All questions were filtered through a moderator who's actively advocating for one of the panelists' bills. Yeah, of course, that's how it would work with Mark Elias there. And Mark Elias in the room, according to the Linwood Times, he was like going out of his way to compliment the Everett Herald, which is like the Linwood Times' closest competitor. And of course, because isn't it the Everett Herald who he's trying to get like tax breaks for, and they're the ones who cover him with kid gloves.
Yep.
So it's like, you got this town hall. You can't even be bothered to just answer impromptu questions from the people you serve. They have to be filtered through a moderator. And then you're just gushing about the one news outlet that treats you with kid gloves and doesn't call you out for anything you do. Sounds about right.
It's wild. I actually went past the school while this was happening, and it looked like school was in session. There were so many cars. People are motivated right now.
Yes.
And to just go in there and have a script read to you. That's crazy.
And I will say, some of them were motivated to do that because they were clapping along to all the, this is why we upended parental rights.
Oh,
Yay!
yeah.
And you really get a sense for why this is a democratic state because you hear the clapping at points where I would be gasping, where my jaw would be to the ground and the audience is like, yay! And I'm like, oh my God, you people voted for this.
Yep.
So maybe you deserve a scripted town hall because,
punishment.
they feel no need to be accountable to you. All right, coming up next, this is just an interesting sort of back and forth. So there's a CEO of a major company in Washington who's decided to move his headquarters because of a homelessness complex that's going in. This is sort of a similar story that we've heard many, many times. And there's some commentators at a different station across the street who had some really harsh words for him. And I just can't wrap my mind around it. So we're going to talk about it coming up next. First, if you're thinking about selling your home this year, I've seen more homes go up for sale in my neighborhood. Wes was right. Wes Jones was telling us that the rest of this month and then May are going to be really, really good times of the year to list your home. And I guess that's because the weather's getting nicer and, it's just, that's a better time to be walking around, I guess, in people's minds, looking at homes, putting your home up for sale.
It's nicer to move too.
Nicer to move too. Yeah. Although the rain, I don't want to move in the rain, but still.
No, but it's clearing out by the time it actually sells. You're in a good season.
That's true. And when really can you rely on there not being any rain? I don't know that there is a month of the year we can do that. But Wes says that right now is actually a great time for home sellers because the real issue is pent-up buyer demand. There's just not enough inventory out there. And so homes that do hit the market are selling quickly, especially homes that are properly prepared for listing and priced correctly. Those are two things that Wes Jones and his team can help you out with. Wes can start by giving you a market analysis. That's going to start that conversation about where your home should be priced to make sure you can get the best possible offers. And then he can also help you figure out, hey, do we need some cosmetic upgrades to your home to make sure that it is more appealing to buyers? And he can manage those projects. If you want, you don't even have to pay for those upgrades until closing. So there's a lot of options to you. So reach out to a few real estate agents for sure, but don't choose one until you've talked to our friend Wes Jones at sellwithwes.com. He says 2025 is shaping up to be a strong year for real estate. So reach out to him now. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right. On Sundays with subscribers, we had on Brian Inslee, which was an awesome conversation. Whip smart guy. Whenever I meet like a CEO or a business-minded person, I'm like, oh, that's why you're successful. You're very, very smart. So we had him on Sundays with subscribers. Brian Inslee is the CEO of INRIX. And you probably heard about INRIX. It's been based in Kirkland for almost since early on in its inception. It was originally in Redmond, like they started in a garage. And then they moved to Kirkland, and they've really enjoyed being in Kirkland. And I mean, Kirkland, if you compare it to Seattle, I would say Kirkland's very business friendly, certainly. But so they're there, and then they find out that King County is going to open one of those homelessness hotels just steps away. Not to mention there's like schools in the area. So it's like, why would you open it there? And their, lease was coming up due, and he was really concerned about the public safety issues that would come along with a homelessness hotel, which I really don't blame him because we've seen that happen over and over. And so Brian joined us on Sunday, and he said one of the most frustrating aspects of this was they really tried to participate in the public process of this homelessness hotel. But at every juncture, it just felt like it was a done deal, and nothing they said or did was going to stop it.
So we heard about this project about a year and a half ago. Okay. And me and a variety of other business leaders in the area sent a letter to the city council, never received a response. So then we went to a city council meeting to speak, and we were not allowed to speak.
Why?
Mainly because they just wanted to kind of explain their rationale, and they didn't really want feedback. And that was really, I think, what bothered a variety of us, is this kind of seemed like it was coming down from King County and Kirkland, and they were going to do it no matter what, and they weren't really open to feedback.
Yeah, so it was like, they always have, I call it the public input hoax, where, hey, we're going to have some town halls, and it's like, we're not going to listen to anything you say. Right. You're not going to change our mind, but we'll have the town hall to check the box. So did it kind of feel like a checking of the box?
It felt like a sell job.
Yeah.
They had somebody from the county there. They had, obviously, the Kirkland deputy manager talking. But it was really, this is what's going to happen, and this is why it's going to be great. And they really weren't open to any feedback.
Yeah, and like other places where we've seen these homelessness complex be shoved down the throat of the community that they're going in, for Brian Inslee, the chief concern was very clearly public safety. They'd already had some concerns with a trail that was sort of near their building and some shady characters that would bring in. So this was sort of putting things over the top.
I would say the number one was employee safety. Okay. Again, we've had break-ins. This was Kirkland. You expect it to be very safe and a wonderful place to live and work. But we've had some break-ins in our parking lot. We've had, as I mentioned, a homeless person come up and just start raiding our kitchen. So fine, we can deal with that. But the biggest issue for us was, I succeed by attracting talented people to my company. I'm literally competing with Amazon and Microsoft for developers and programmers and engineers. So, if they don't feel safe coming to work, I've got a problem.
Yeah. So he makes the best decision he thinks he can make for his company, and they're moving their headquarters to South Bellevue. And look, we also talked about the overall business climate. There are some bad business decisions be made at the state level where Bellevue he's not going to be able to escape that in Bellevue. But certainly I think Bellevue has done a much better job at balancing public safety, outreach to the homeless and economic interest. And so they see that, and the decision is done. I mean, they did what they could with the city of Kirkland, felt like their voice wasn't heard, concerned about public safety. And so he says, okay, we're renewing our lease and we're going to move to, we're not renewing our lease, we're going to move to Bellevue. I was shocked by some of the reactions to this. To me, this is a story as old as time. How many business owners have we had on this show talking about that exact issue? And it's like, it's not waking leaders up to it. We've had so many Seattle business owners, Ballard, who are like, what the heck is going on? I can't conduct business when there's literally someone ODing on fentanyl in the alcove, and you guys want to call this empathy and leave them there. So this is like a story as old as time. It's been going on in Seattle more and more so for 15 years. And King County, was it Redmond, I think, was going to push one of these like homeless complexes in their downtown area. And thankfully there was enough pushback. But it's like bad policy. Don't care what anybody has to say about it. The stakeholders aren't brought to the table. And then people end up moving their businesses. And everybody wants to gasp like, oh my gosh, do you not care about the homeless? It's just crazy to me. So over on Cairo Radio, there's a midday show, mid-morning show, G and Ursula. Look, I love my friend Ursula Reutin. I love you, Ursula. I wouldn't have this job if it weren't for you. Literally brought me to Seattle to work in news. Doesn't mean that her opinion is correct on this. It's very, very wrong. So the G and Ursula show, this is at Cairo Radio. G. Scott, host of the G and Ursula show on Cairo News Radio, slammed Inslee's reasoning, especially since the facility isn't open yet. Quote, imagine having such a strong opinion about what's going on somewhere, and yet you haven't even opened in that area, G explained. How can you really take this person, this CEO, seriously? And by the way, where did he get his data from when it comes to this topic? Are you kidding me? There is so much ample evidence of what happens around these homelessness facilities. And to say, how could you take this person, this CEO, seriously? He has one of the most successful businesses in Washington State, and he's been here for years investing in our community and creating hundreds of jobs around the world. And you, no offense, like a low-tier radio host, want to be like, how can you take this CEO seriously? Give me a break. It's absolutely crazy. How can you have such a strong opinion? So you're knocking the CEO, as hundreds of employees he wants to keep safe, for having a strong opinion about their safety and their well-being, given ample evidence of what has happened around these homelessness facilities and other areas, evidence that I will talk to you about momentarily. And then Ursula Reutin, who's a co-host, said, the CEO of INRIX is an example of weak leadership. Brian Inslee is not being truthful, and I think it's actually shameful that he's blaming a facility for the homeless that hasn't even opened yet for his decision to move. Holy smokes. So we'll get to this in a second, but it's like you need like some sort of spreadsheet to tell you, here's how 911 calls increase. No, there has been so much ample real world evidence of what happens when you have one of these homelessness facilities, and this was Brian's chief complaint that he articulated very well on our show, that if it were a clean and sober facility, they probably wouldn't have the same concern and they wouldn't have moved. And he'd be happy to do volunteer and help out with it. But this, like all the other King County facilities, is not a clean and sober facility. And so you have people who are living in what used to be a motel still doing drugs. And you don't just naturally think, yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. Andrea Suarez, and I don't know if this was in a direct response to Brian Inslee and INRIX's decision, but it's very pertinent. She pushed this out. And of course, who knows better than Andrea? Who's actually in these places? Do I need data from the city and the county? Or am I going to believe what Andrea Suarez says when she's actually out working with these individuals, going into these facilities that the county are run by the government? She said, these are my photos. On the left, a clean and sober housing program. And it shows people sitting around a very clean location, gathered round. They look actually like pretty put together. Looks like a very safe place. She said, on the right, low barrier housing first drug use enablement program. Which one should taxpayers fund? And the low barrier drug enablement program, filth, squalor, overdoses, deaths inside the facility. How many of those have we covered? A guy beating his dog in the Seattle apartment. He was just given an apartment to get him out of the Burien homeless encampment. There's been all sorts of crimes and calls from 911, guy beating his dog right in the window for people to see. It's because you're letting people live there and they're still taking them out of a tent and putting them in an apartment when you haven't fixed any of the things that are going on, be they mental or substance abuse or both. That's not gonna make them better neighbors. So to just dismiss when there's ample evidence that Brian Inslee is can't be taken seriously as a CEO, or is lying and wanted to move to Bellevue anyway and is just using this homelessness complex as an excuse. Now, I don't own a business as big as Brian's is, but you don't pick up and move everything and everybody when you don't have a good reason to do so. And from a business environment, taxation, sort of monetary standpoint, it's actually worse for him to go to Bellevue. The square footage on a business lease in Bellevue is far higher than the square footage on a business lease in Kirkland. And take it from me, I mean, we've looked all over the place when we decided where our studio move was going to be for what the square, I mean, you can go to Seattle and get it for like $9 a square foot, but nobody wants to be there because it's dangerous and filthy and horrible. But the most expensive place in Washington right now for a business lease is Bellevue. So what, they just decide for no reason they're going to move and pay more per square footage to be in Bellevue? No, it's clearly the safety concern. So just to dismiss that from his firsthand experience running a business there, concerned about the safety of employees, and he's a bad guy for speaking out about it, even though he spent a year and a half trying to tell the city his concerns to no avail? I know I have some bad takes sometimes. Now, Ursula, I love you. I love you. It's just a bad take. It's a bad take. I'm sure I've had bad takes that you've talked about on your show. So Brian, as I said in the interview, he talked about this like, we don't need to wait for it to open. We know exactly what's going to happen because it's happened everywhere else these homeless hotels have gone.
There are a variety of these facilities around the city. The interesting thing about this facility is we don't really have to wonder what it's going to happen. We've seen Plymouth Housing, which is the operator of this facility, operate several other facilities in the city. So we know it's going to happen, right? We've seen the number one place for 911 calls in Seattle is this and the Plymouth Housing facility in Seattle and the DESC facilities. So we know what happens when you, like you said, open them up. No supervision, no drug testing, no real background checks. You know, it's pretty obvious that this is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So there's always this complaint that happens when, and I'm sure somebody will respond to our interview like that, like it's a very NIMBY thing. Well, I want to help the homeless, but not in my backyard. For you, is there a type of facility you would have been okay with opening that close by?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be fine with this facility if they basically had it a drug-free hotel.
Yeah.
And if they had some on-site supervision. Like those would be the only two things they would have to do to, I think, have the local community be comfortable with it.
Yeah, and I think that whole reaction to Brian Inslee coming out and saying, hey, we're moving our business and here's why, is just evidence of why we're still in this situation. Like at this point in the homelessness realm, the government, the nonprofits, no one in our state working in tandem with the government on this issue deserves the benefit of the doubt anymore. There's ample evidence that the way the housing first approach that they have used has not worked. I mean, homelessness is worse. That's number one, right? Substance abuse is worse. That's number two, right? Some of the most, the blocks where there is the highest concentration of 911 calls are where there's a high concentration of homeless people and drug users. I think that's number three. The evidence has added up that the housing first approach does not work. So I just don't get, especially people who have a voice to push back against these things, these automatic like, oh, the business person is just complaining for no reason. That's why we're here, is we shut out in Seattle the voices of business owners and stakeholders who it took a lot of courage for them to speak up because of the pushback like that they get, to just say this is the reality of what we're going through. I mean, business owners are what make a city successful. That's just the truth, right? They're the economic engines of the state. And to dismiss them out of hand and just expect that they'll deal with a homelessness facility that has proven time and time and time again, a model that it brings drug abuse and crime to your front door. Why would we have that expectation? Why wouldn't the harshest criticism be reserved for the government that continues to push an approach that's not working? It's just wild to me. So we appreciate Brian coming on the show. Again, if you're not a subscriber, but you want to catch our Sunday shows, you can become a subscriber today. unDividedPod.com. Just click on the little banner that says support the show for $5. You can check out our full interview with Brian and all our other subscriber content, like our daily subscriber show polls, etc. unDividedPod.com. Okay, I have figured it out, Nicole. I figured it out.
Oh, man.
Took a lot of research, a lot of work, but I know who the most insufferable people in America are. And And I'll tell you coming up next. First, our friend Zach Abraham at Bulwark Capital is having another one of his live webinars coming up on March 20th. Oh my gosh, that's just in a few days. I feel like we've been talking about this webinar forever. It's going to be the first 100 days of the Trump administration. So if you're worried about the stock markets, like, look, whenever the stock markets go up and down and up and down and down and down and down, that's worrisome for people who, especially if you're getting close to retirement. So Zach can talk to you about what's happening right now with the stock market, how the first 100 days of the Trump administration and the decisions that have happened during that time can impact your retirement portfolio. He'll also do a little bit of a longer term outlook for the rest of 2025, and he'll do a full reveal of how Bulwark is always looking for opportunities to lower risk, lower cost, give your retirement as much upside as possible. It's like running your portfolio through a Department of Retirement Efficiency. So, and again, a good opportunity to get a second opinion as well. Totally free. Sign up for Zach's first 100 days live webinar coming up this Thursday, March 20th, 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. You can register right now, knowyourriskradio.com. That's knowyourriskradio.com. All right. Winner for the most insufferable people in America, unionized Starbucks baristas. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. First of all, please don't spit in my drink. I have been known to go to Starbucks on occasion, and there are many a barista who I adore. The Starbucks down the street, I adore them. They're so sweet. We always have nice conversations. So not every Starbucks barista is insufferable, but I will tell you the ones who unionized most insufferable workers in America. So I don't know if this happened a couple days ago all across the country, including in Seattle. There were walkouts, not only at unionized Starbucks, but at some in solidarity with the unions. And I don't even know the Starbucks workers account that posted this on TikTok. It didn't say which Starbucks it was, but I'm just going to pretend it was a Starbucks in Seattle because I can really see it being a Starbucks in Seattle.
At this time, the workers at this Starbucks will be walking out and going on strike.
Yay! She's so good.
We are striking to protest all the unresolved unfair labor practice charges and to push for improved wages, benefits, and staffing. Starbucks has not acted in accordance with the path forward that they agreed to last year, and we deserve a fair contract.
Finish my latte first? Can you finish my latte first at least? I'd be mad if they did that. And I'm like, wait a second. You haven't fulfilled my ticket yet. Oh my gosh. You can just tell it's like this Daisy was her name, or I don't want to misgender Daisy, but just like, oh my God, you could see it in her eyes. Like, this is the most important thing I'll ever do in my life. Like, that's how she felt in that moment. Like, good for you. However, whenever I see this, I just cannot help but point out to them, Starbucks will literally pay for your college tuition. In Seattle, they're making more than $20 an hour. Like, not even Starbucks wants you to stay there long term. This is a job for, I would say, retirees, maybe a part-time job for people who are staying home with their kids. I see that sometimes. Or this is a job for young people. When I go to Starbucks, it's always young people. Again, there's a nice girl at the Starbucks up the street, and she's getting ready to go to college. And I talk to her all the time about what she's doing in college. You know, Starbucks covers some aspects of college tuition, and she seems perfectly happy with it. I don't think it's a union Starbucks up the street. So I was looking at the, first of all, you will not find the benefits and the pay that you get as a Starbucks barista at any other coffee shop in the nation. I challenge you to find me a coffee shop where you could work as a barista and get the benefits that Starbucks gives its employees. I was looking at, this is for... they call them, what do they call them? They don't call them baristas.
Oh.
Our partners. You know, it's some sort of like yay team thing. So they give them comprehensive medical, dental, and vision insurance, mental health resources, including 20 therapy sessions a year, paid leave, paid family leave, whether it's through birth, adoption, or surrogacy, vacation and sick time, bereavement time, financial protection for you and your family with life insurance, stock equity, 401k match, 140 degrees to choose from for your first-time bachelor's degree online at Arizona State University. And by the way, nearly 90% of U.S. Starbucks stores have at least one person who's enrolled in getting help with their tuition assistance. Spouses and family members of military veterans employed are also eligible for that benefit. Like, isn't that crazy? And you're up there standing saying, we're walking out and we're about not making any more lattes today until we get a fair contract. What is more fair than that? Some of them make like $25 an hour. And they will literally pay for you to be able to find a career you love that you can grow into. The most entitled workers in America. It makes me want to never set foot in a Starbucks ever again. Someone who knows more about labor and unions than I do, can you not just fire them? Is that like union
I don't know how that
busting?
works.
Somebody tell me how that works. Can you not just fire every single one of them that walks out? Or is that not allowed?
I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't if it was allowed. So
Well, I know that, public perception. But I got to be
Sure,
honest, I
but who
actually don't know
cares?
how that works. If you actually cannot fire them. Because like eventually, what if they walk out and they're not there for days and days and days? There has to be a point at which you can replace them. Somebody's going to tell me in the comments that is like a union member and knows more about this stuff than I do. But I would fire every single one of them. I know Starbucks had gone and closed some low-performing stores and people had accused them of closing low-performing union stores
Right.
or unsafe union stores. But some of the ones they listed, I'm like, yeah, that Starbucks is unsafe. It's always disgusting. And the bathrooms are used for people to shoot up fentanyl. So it's like the most entitled workers in America are these unionized, and I don't know, I mean, not all of them. Please don't spit in my drinks. The unionized Starbucks workers who are getting $25 an hour in a job that even the company wants them to leave from and will help them do so. It's just insane. Too mean?
they call them partners, by the way.
Yes. Starbucks partners. Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to skip Starbucks today, just in case.
I can avoid.
All right. We're going to talk about this controversy over the deportation flight that went to El Salvador and whether Donald Trump is just thumbing his nose at the rule of law. First, I've told you guys to take the First Mark Challenge because it really is a no-brainer and it can help you and your family save money. And who doesn't want to save money and spend money on other things other than insurance? Doesn't that make sense? I think so. We've heard from so many undivided viewers and listeners who finally gave in after me nagging you for years and took the First Mark Challenge. They're like, Brandi, why did I wait so long? Chad was one of them. He got, this is so cute. He even sent us a picture. He was like, I went to First Mark for my car, house, and pet insurance. They weren't able to help me save money with my car or house, but they did get me my insurance for my service dog Sergeant, saved him $100 a month. People, that's $1,200 a year, all for just making a phone call and take the First Mark Challenge. Eric says they saved him 30% on his auto policy and a whopping 70% on his homeowner's policy. He said, I now tell anyone I know who's dealing with changes to their insurance to give First Mark a call. I did, and I'm truly richer for it. Woo! FirstMarkInsurance.com, FirstMarkInsurance.com. The very best part is they work for you, not the insurance companies. All right, let's get to some national news. So the Trump administration, you've probably seen the video. I'll play it momentarily. It's pretty great, actually. I want it injected straight into my veins. But so the Trump administration ran this deportation flight to El Salvador. And you might remember there was an agreement made with the president of El Salvador. And they have this crazy high security, max security prison where they're like, send us the gang members you're deporting and we'll house them here and they'll never see the light of day. So there is some controversy, though, because they were doing this deportation flight to El Salvador. This is from the Associated Press. Trump administration deports hundreds of immigrants, even as a judge orders their removals to be stopped. So literally while this flight is in the air, a judge said, bring them back. And the Trump administration said, oops, too late. No, they were over at the time, they say, when this order came down, the flight was over international waters. So the argument from the Trump administration is that that judge no longer had standing to make that decision because the flight was no longer in U.S. airspace. And I think it was all timed very strategically by the White House to try to get this flight off the ground over into international waters or airspace before this ruling came down from the judge. And so indeed, they delivered this flight to El Salvador. El Salvador accepted it. Even the president of El Salvador sent out a video and he said, too late, oops, to the AP story. So here's some of this video. And I can't play the sound from it because unfortunately they put this music over it and I don't want a copyright ding. I want to read for you. Allie Bradley had pushed out tweet along with it because she was talking about the types of people who were deported to this facility. And she said, I confirmed via a high-level DHS official 261 illegal immigrants were deported to El Salvador yesterday. Here's the breakdown. 137 through the Alien Enemies Act. 101 were Venezuelans removed through regular immigration proceedings. 21 were Salvadorian MS-13 gang members, including 2 MS-13 ringleaders who were also returned. So there's all these lefties losing their mind. And look, the video was intense. I'm like, dang. I mean, that video was very clear about deterrence. You watch that video and them shoving those gang members out, making them kneel and shaving their beards and their hair. And
Yikes.
I mean, surrounded by, there was like lines and lines of military and guards with these big rifles. And like, you watch that and you're like, I think I'll just stay put in my country of origin because Donald Trump's going to send me there and I don't want to be there. So there's all this hand-wringing on the left about whether their due process rights are being stripped from them. If they were arrested and set for deportation in the United States of America, they do have certain rights under the Constitution. So are those rights and due process being stripped from them by being unceremoniously put on an airplane and taken to this very scary place in El Salvador? And look, I'm of two minds about that. So I had mentioned that list of who Ali Bradley says was deported. If you're in this country illegally, and especially if you're committing crimes, like they said 21 of these were Salvadorian MS-13 gang members, there shouldn't be any due process for just sending them back to El Salvador, right? I mean, why would there need to be some sort of due process to say you're here illegally, you're not supposed to be in the country, so we're going to send you out of the country? So if they're from El Salvador, I don't see any issues with due process. We're literally sending them back to the country they're supposed to be in. Now, I can understand, so the other one that I understand, 137 of them were sent through the Alien Enemies Act. So remember, Donald Trump has labeled certain cartel gangs as terror organizations. So I also think once you are now part of a terror organization, I don't believe that the same due process should apply to put you on a plane and put you into a high max facility. Now, if you're just being removed, this is my one caveat where I feel a couple different ways. If you're being like caught up in an ICE raid, and yes, you're in the country illegally, but you're not wanted as a gang member / terrorist or having been convicted of another crime, or, for instance, if you have an asylum claim that you're waiting to run the course, I do believe there has to be some due process in that. And I don't want to see those people necessarily in that El Salvador prison where they're being dragged out by force from a bus and meant to kneel and shave. But it doesn't seem like those are the kinds of people who are going there. If they are, then yes, I have a problem with that. But I haven't seen case-by-case examples of, this is someone who was here on an asylum claim and now they put them on a plane to this scary prison in El Salvador, or this is someone who was in the U.S. illegally but hadn't committed any new law violations. Like, that's not the person I want in that facility per se. So I kind of have a nuanced opinion on it. In our daily subscriber show poll, I asked you guys on Patreon, Locals, and X if this is something that you're concerned about. Are you concerned about whether illegal aliens are being given due process as part of President Trump's deportation efforts? Nicole, yay or nay? Does it concern you? Do you want to make sure? Nicole's like, nope.
Not concerned.
Oh my gosh. Nicole can always rely on Nicole to be honest. I mean, if they're a gang member, hell no. Why are we hand-wringing over, the stuff that MS-13 does? Like rape, behead, burn alive, mass murder, kidnapping, torture.
Not human things.
Right, not human things. Forgive me, but that's how much the left hates Trump.
Right.
Is like we discovered last week. They'll take the side of someone with cannibalism fetishes. All because the right bad.
Right.
They'll take the side of MS-13 gang members who've murdered countless people.
The only time I would want to make sure is in the event that there's any chance of them being brought back because we did something wrong. So I want to make sure we do it right so they are never allowed back.
Right.
That type of situation. But no, I'm not really concerned.
So 7% of people said they are concerned. Sandy's one of them. Sandy W said, yes, I'm worried. They revoked a visa for a doctor with no reasoning. I'm not familiar with that case. They shipped off 2 planes full of people they claimed to be gang members, no proof required. And after a judge ordered them not to be deported, we have laws that require due process. The executive branch cannot supersede those. Adrienne also said, I said yes because I worry about the slippery slope this precedent sets. Of course, I think illegal aliens, especially those who have committed other violent crimes, should be removed, but skirting whatever process is in place to facilitate that shouldn't be done. For example, El Salvador has been rounding up gang members in their country and putting them in jail. Good thing. But now they have taken it so far as to have quotas for certain neighborhoods, and anyone can end up being arrested for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, not affiliated with gangs, etc. Let me see. Daigle says our laws are for the citizens of this country. I'm okay with due process for anyone here on a legal visa. Yeah, and I again, that's sort of I have a nuanced position on this. Those are terrorists now. They've been dubbed terrorists. So I don't know that but we even had you have due process for the Boston Marathon bombers, and for people who have actually carried out acts of terrorism. I do understand the point about the slippery slope. Like, I'm not shedding tears at night for those gang members who got all their hair shaved off and, are being thrown around by guards in El Salvador. But I do understand the concern about a slippery slope. I will say, as someone who's cares about the Constitution being followed, I am concerned about that. Now, I agree with the Trump administration that once that plane was in the air over international waters, I don't think that they had a legal obligation to turn it around. If you come here illegally, you do not have the same rights and due process. It has been a mainstream lie for a long time. I actually disagree with that. I've said this on the show, and I'm not a constitutional scholar. But I do think if you're subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, which means if you're here illegally and you kill someone, we can put you on trial in our courts, and we do, and we have, like Laken Riley's killer. So that to me says you are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, and therefore you're under the protection of the Constitution of the United States. But I don't think if it's this long drawn out process, we're like, hey, you're here illegally. It should be a very quick process to say, bye. I don't understand how lengthy does due process have to be? Like, you get to prove that you're not here illegally when it's very clear that you are? I don't understand. It seems like a very quick process. Let me see here. Chris is on Nicole's level. Illegal aliens? Hell no. GTFO. Stacy, being deported is an easy way out, short and fast. Some of them should want to be deported. And that's also kind of a concern of mine. Those MS-13 gang members, I bet they're going to have a much easier time getting out and back into the fold in a country in Central America, for instance, like in Mexico. If you send them back to Mexico, they're going to be back before you know it. Whereas if you put them in one of our prisons, maybe we can keep them off the streets for a little longer, Interesting. But, we're all independent thinkers here on Undivided. Except Nicole's all in. She's all in. She's independent. She's an independent thinker who has made up her mind very forcefully on this issue.
At this point, these are bad people. Sorry.
Oh, I agree on that. MS-13 gang members, 100%.
Go away.
Bye. I'm worried, though. This is going to get dangerous really quick because MS-13 isn't just going to roll over and take it. I'm super worried about Border Patrol safety. I'm very worried about ICE safety, especially with all the lefties exposing their every move and doxing immigration agents on social media. I am very, very worried for their safety because MS-13 is no joke. I will say, though, all of this is working. All of it is working. And one of the reasons I said Washington State should care about what's happening at the southern border, and I said at the time, Jay Inslee should be on the news begging, at the time, Biden to do something about the border because we had record fentanyl deaths that were happening on our streets. And where does that fentanyl come from? Green has come over from China, gets brought up by the drug cartel and mules up through the southern border, right up through Canada, Oregon to Washington State. Well, get this. This is from Bloomberg, too, so mainstream media. Fentanyl seized at U.S.-Mexico border falls 40%, the lowest since 2021. So, the border crossings have almost evaporated. Turns out all we had to do was try. So you increase the security at the southern border, and also you release videos like that one showing what prison in El Salvador you might end up in. And there's a huge deterrent factor. And so now the quantity of fentanyl seized by the U.S. at the southern border is the lowest it has been in years. And it was steadily increasing. So that's what we want to see, right? And what Trump's doing is clearly working. The show of force, the deterrent factor, border crossings are at almost zero. There's a few dozen a day. And the amount of fentanyl that they are finding at the southern border has plummeted because the illegal crossings and people who dare to do that aren't as emboldened as they were. So to me, That's worth it. It's worth it. I understand the slippery slope thing. All right. Did I skip a story? No, I didn't, because I am perfect at my job. All right, we'll get to comments in our sanity check, which is on the same topic, which is chef's kiss. Love Tom Homan. First, I have talked to you guys over and over about my success on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program. There's a lot of weight loss programs out there right now. I mean, I get it. It seems very attractive to be able to take a pill or an injection and to be able to lose weight, and you're seeing all those results. But to me, throughout my life, I've done so many like crash and fad diets, and I always gain the weight back. The only one that has worked for me long-term is Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. And that's because it's not like a fad diet. It's just teaching you what to eat in the right portions and then how to make some lifestyle changes so you can keep that weight off for life. And it's something you can always keep going back to in the tools that you learn on the program. So it's not going to be right for every person. And it is, the first 60 days of the program is pretty difficult. You really have to be committed, but the weight comes off so quickly that for me, it kept me motivated. I lost almost 30 pounds in just the first 2 months. So eastsideweightlossclinic.com. Go there. They have a handy scheduler where you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team. If you do, just make sure to tell them that you heard about them on the Undivided podcast. And good luck to you. All right. Subscriber comments, shall we? Robert Parr. Any parole Levy, any parole supervision required? I don't know if he had supervision required because he got clemency from the governor. So I want to say that clemency does not mean that you don't have to have any supervision whatsoever. I'd have to look into his individual case, but he was subject to a gubernatorial act of clemency. So maybe it's a little bit different for him.
I don't know, but I do think there is some, I have heard from someone who spent 20 years in jail. I mean, you're institutionalized. That is normal. And going back doesn't really scare you the same anymore. And so if he was not provided those services, I know that I've heard from someone personally that actually did help him, and she thought that he was given all of the resources. He had every resource they have for post convicted criminals getting out of jail to create something successful in their life. And he chose not to. But I do think that is a thing in the state that it could use some work as far as like helping kids that start in jail very young and become institutionalized because they don't have the same fear of going back.
Yeah. And like things like, for instance, that you wouldn't think I'd be in favor of, but I am, a little more out the door cash for criminals. So sometimes they're released, and if they don't have anybody to come pick them up, like they have enough money basically for a bus ticket or whatever it is. And I think there's been some efforts in recent years to increase that, but you need to have a solid release plan that's like, you're not living on the streets, you've got a place to go, you have a job lined up. I think more needs to be done to make sure that we set them up for success when they go out the door. And part of that is there needs to be better rehabilitation in prisons. Like they always want to act like it's one or the other. Like, oh, either prisons are this place to rehabilitate or it's a place to be punished. No, it's both. But like we can make sure that we give them what they need so that they don't walk out the door and all of a sudden it's easier for them to fall back into the life they had.
Sometimes I've heard of people on parole that, I mean, they're called out of jobs to do like UA tests, things like that. And it makes it very hard to succeed in a workforce. But it sounds like he was given all the opportunities.
All the opportunities in the world. Papa Woody, $5 super chat. I can't wait to share this to everybody, especially Wah Dems page. Yeah, go tag them.
Please.
At Wah House Dems and see how fast they untag themselves. So they don't have to see anything you have to say about them. Matthew Adams, $10 super chat. I think Rep Simmons' actions are terrible. Good one.
Well done.
Greg, King County could learn a lot from this CEO. Successful people act, not react to problems. 100%. Andrea Suarez jumped on, left a comment. The homeless hotels that are low barrier are a dealer's marketplace. Addicts must commit crimes to afford drugs. These hotels will ruin a community. Brian is completely justified. And that's coming from Andrea. And that's the thing is like, if you're a drug dealer and you know there's 100 people in that building right there in active addiction, that's a pretty good place for you to go deal drugs, don't you think? As opposed to, oh, that facility doesn't allow anybody in there to be using drugs. So that's probably not where I'm going to start, right?
Right. And that
wild.
I love the wait for something to go wrong. Like it hasn't even opened yet. How do you know something's going to go bad? So wait, you're supposed to take all this information based on, old or other facilities that have opened and bad things have happened. So you're supposed to wait till one of your employees is attacked and then it's okay for you to leave.
Right.
So if that happens, so instead of being preventative and just getting out because you know something's going to go wrong and you're going to keep your employees safe, you're supposed to wait because it hasn't even opened yet.
Yeah.
All of that argument is so out of
It's so harshly judging a CEO who's making a decision he thinks is best for the public safety of his employees, as opposed to harshly judging the government for continuing to do the same model over and over and getting the same result. We know that from any homeless hotel has had the exact same problems. I don't need to it's like the abused partner syndrome. It's like your partner's punched you in the face 100 times and you keep taking them back. So you're like, they're not going to punch me in the face this time.
Right.
Yeah, they probably are, because they've done it every other time. It's just crazy.
Successful people, they're just the evil ones.
Evil CEOs. Let's see here. Baron, $5 super chat. Sorry, I skipped way down the page. I apologize. I'll come back to it. Harm reduction prolongs the deaths of the addicted, keeping the money train running to NGOs, and by proxy funding Dem campaigns, keeping the homeless industrial complex alive. We need an NGO audit. I agree. Kelly, Timothy Pauly plans to be active as well in criminal justice and wants to be an advocate for criminals. This is crazy.
Kelly is the daughter.
The daughter of Lauren.
Both victims. There are two victims.
Just horrible, Kelly. Yeah. We just feel for you. It's awful. This is crazy. We can have safe communities by leaving these criminals and murderers in prison. I agree. I mean, at that point, there are some people who they truly redeem themselves behind bars. And there are some people who committed crimes 30 years ago or 20 years ago where the sentences today for those crimes aren't as severe. Like when we legalized weed, if you were on some crazy, your sentence really got elevated because of marijuana or whatever it is, I understand them wanting to take a second look at your case. In the context of what else you did, right? I'm not saying no one's ever deserving of pardon or a clemency, but someone who killed 3 people and tried to kill 2 others, why is that anywhere on your list for release? I don't care if they're 100 years old. The intent was for them to die in prison. Let them die in prison. Crazy to me.
It's wild that we
God.
talked about it last week, but in 2016 the parole board looked at it and said, oh my gosh, just that you're even up for parole is ridiculous. We've got to make this a harsher sentence.
Right.
And then 5 years later the parole board has flipped its ways and just decides everybody should get out.
Well, now it's packed with
I don't know who else. Yeah, I don't know who else is a better example of who should stay in jail other than maybe the Green River Killer, which I think that these people are on the same scale. He killed people without any remorse.
I mean, in brutal fashion.
Fashion.
I mean, to me, we need a closer look at the people on the Indeterminate Sentencing Review Board and how it's structured and what their actual goal is and how it's aligning with the mission of what it's supposed to be, because they're supposed to be picky and choosy. But it seems like anyone who comes before them, it's like A+. Oh, you're sorry? Oh, you didn't tell us you were sorry. Okay, yeah, you can get out now. That's essentially what Inslee's letter was.
Yeah, you were.
Timothy Pauly's, he's sorry.
He's remorseful now. Oh, so he put on a good show this time. He didn't last time. Good to know.
Yeah, he knew that last time it was denied.
Yep.
Because you told him you weren't remorseful.
What do I have to do different?
So he came back 3 years later while you were on your way out of office and said, I'm remorseful now. Wow. Let's see. David Pollan on the union issue. Cannot be fired if a protected strike or picketing, depending on the purposes and means of the strike action. Federal law, so it would be a felony to fire them, Brandi. Oops, okay. So I figured there was something like that. Yep. Sergeant Pickles, minimum wage should be set so that a person working 2,000 hours per year can just make it over the poverty line. Seems harsh, but incentives getting a better job. And look, some jobs have to be minimum wage. Or else why do we even have a minimum wage? I just don't understand the whole... I mean, even at the McDonald's by our house, they're paying on their little marquee. Sometimes they talk about $24 an hour. And I get it that things are much more expensive. It's not like I can be like, well, I worked for $2.30 an hour with tips, on my first job. I get it. We're not living in those times anymore. It's an expensive state. But I feel like the Democrats intentionally make it more expensive so they can intentionally do things like that and raise the minimum wage so much. It's just
all you're
wild.
doing is taking away business. You're sending more stores into online shopping so they don't have to employ employees.
Yeah.
And then there just won't be as many choices for fast food or anything else.
You just automate it even further. I mean, look up to the extent to which Starbucks has already automated, drink making and all of that stuff. And so every time that you do this, it just forces companies to automate. Yeah. Let's see. Matthew Cook, the judge acknowledged in his ruling that he didn't know if the law Trump used was applicable. Should you at least have an opinion if it is or not as a judge? Yeah, I guess
would
you
think so.
should, but who knows? Bill Biz, $20 super chat. My respect for the lower courts has greatly diminished over the last few years. I almost feel that the Trump administration should defy lower court decisions until SCOTUS rules. Yeah, this one is just weird. Like, why does one judge have the ability to say, turn that flight around full of like gang members and bring them back? It's very, I mean, I understand we have a separation of powers and we have checks and balances, and I don't want presidents going rogue until the high court makes decisions on these things. But man, Democrats are really picking their champions and who they're going to fight for and stand up for. It's not you, the working people of the country. It is MS-13 gang members and city council appointees who have cannibalism fetishes. It's very strange, very strange. All right, good comments per the usual.
Did you get that last one? There's one more.
Oh, Gray Matter. Sex State has 100% authority to deport without due process. These are illegals and criminal gang members and can be deported directly. TDA members too. Got it. All right. Good comments per the usual. And with that, let's get on this subject to our closing sanity check. Okay, so as we had mentioned, some of the people on this flight were being deported through the Alien Enemies Act, which is a very, very, very old act. And Tom Homan, the border czar, was asked about this by intrepid reporters, and here was his response.
You say to those who claim you're using a 200-year-old law to circumvent due process?
An old law? Not as old as the Constitution. We still pay attention to that, don't we?
But some would say this is...
How many more times do you plan on deporting?
Walks away. Legend. That man is a legend. That has been our sanity check for today, and that has been today's episode of Undivided. A reminder, we're running a promo right now for military veterans and first responders. You can get 30% off your first year of Undivided by signing up at undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com, and just use the promo code USA. USA. But just once. One USA at checkout. No proof required, just the honor system. But we appreciate your service, your sacrifice for our country, for our first responders. We appreciate all the shit you take from our elected leaders in order to keep us safe. So, there you go. I know it doesn't make up for it, but 30% off, I guess, is something. That's good stuff. Okay, what else, Nicole? I think that's it. I
think that's it.
New episode of Doge Watch coming out tomorrow. Back on the live show at noon. Again, if you haven't signed up to support the show,
Happy
what are you
St. Patrick's
doing?
Day.
Oh, it's St. Patrick's Day.
There you go.
Is that a green shirt?
It is green.
It is. It's a little minty, eh?
Little mint.
My husband asked me that right before I left today. He's like, are you wearing green? I was like, no. And I dare you. I told him, I dare you to pinch me. I dare you. He didn't, because he knows better. See you tomorrow.